I just gotta let you know that you've been so good to me. And I know that I can't do it by myself. I need your love so desperately. It's been times I wanted to give up, but your words, they spoke to me. Fill my spirit, help me to believe, but sometimes I still get weak.
I need you to fill me up, until I overflow, the keeper of my way. I need you to fill me up, I need your love always, so I won't go astray, the keeper of my way. I know you know my thoughts, I know you know my flaws. Your love fills up every empty part of me that was hiding for so long. The love of my life, now I've evolved. I wanna be what you want, and by your strength I'll break down every wall. I need you to fill me up, until I overflow, the keeper of my way, the keeper of my way. I need you to fill me up, I need you, I need your love always, so I won't go astray, the keeper of my way. Can I get a witness? If you hear me say, if you feel me say,
If you feel me, say yeah, 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 yeah. Let me hear you say yeah, 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 yeah.
I need you to fill me up, until I overflow, the keeper of my way. I need you to fill me up,
Lord,
I need your love always, so I won't go astray, the keeper of my way.
You're the keeper of my way.
Test. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. Yeah, that's good.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Khan.
Shalom.
We're not live yet.
Shalam Yasharahla.
Shalom.
Welcome back to Bible Basics. The water for tuning in to tonight's class. I appreciate each and every one of you. Please don't forget to like and share the lessons. I'm your teacher tonight. My name is SHAHAD, and to my left is
Yathrawan.
all praises. And tonight we're going to discuss the curses in Deuteronomy 28. So Why are the curses important? The curses are important because it lets us know who the Israelites are. The Israelites were the only people to go through all of these curses at one time or another. There's no other nation that has been cursed as we have by the Most High, right? Let's get some scripture to back that up. What it shows is that the Most High was only dealing with one people, the Israelites. Those were the people that he chose. So let's back that up in scripture. Grab me Amos 3, 1 and 2.
This is Amos chapter 3, verse 1. Hear this word that the Lord hath spoken against you, O children of Israel, against the whole family which I brought up from the land of Egypt, saying, you only have I known of all the families of the earth.
So of all the people of the earth, only the Israelites had the Most High known. Go ahead.
Therefore, I will punish you for all your iniquities.
So he's only going to punish the Israelites, very similar to, your children. When your children do bad, you punish them, right? It's the same thing with the Most High. Grab for me, we're going to go to Romans 9 and 3. And what this is going to show is the importance of knowing who the Israelites are today, right? So that we know what it is that we need to do. We know what the Most High has promised us, if we do what it is that he's asked us to do. Go ahead with that when you're ready.
Romans chapter 9, verse 3. For I could wish that myself were accursed from Christ, for my brethren, my kinsmen according to the flesh.
According to the what?
According to the flesh.
Yeah, it's important because Israelites are Israelites. They are a family of people, right? Go ahead and read.
Who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the law and the service of God and the promises. Whose are the fathers, and of whom as concerning the flesh Christ came, who is over all, God bless forever. Amen.
So the Israelites are the only people whom pertaineth the adoption, the glory, and the covenants of the Most High, the giving of the law. The Most High only gave the law to Israel, and the services of the Most High and the promises. We are the people that the Most High chose, and we are the only ones that he is dealing with. So let's get into the curses, right? Let's start out with Deuteronomy 28 and 15. Let's find out why it is that we're experiencing these curses. Go ahead.
Deuteronomy 28, verse 15. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee.
So, if we did not observe to do all the Most High's laws and commandments and his statutes, he was gonna curse us, right? So let's get into the curses and find out what they are. Go ahead with 16.
Verse 16. Cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field.
Cursed shalt thou be in the city. If you look around in the U.S. and, even throughout the world, in the urban areas, in the cities, it is black and brown people who are at the bottom of societies. It is black and brown people who live in the poorest and most dilapidated and most undesirable areas in those cities. From the East Coast to the West Coast, from sea to shining sea, as they say, right? There's no other people that live in conditions like we do consistently. I have some information on what has been done to keep us separated from the other nations and to keep us in the conditions that we're in. This is Vanderbilt Law Review. It's titled White Man's Roads Through Black Men's Homes, Advancing Racial Equity Through Highway Reconstruction. And this is by Deborah N. Archer. You want to read that and start it out?
Con. From the article, racial and economic segregation is often understood as a natural consequence of poor choices by individuals. The narrative is that residents of central cities are themselves primarily to blame for concentrations of poverty and violence. In reality, racially segregated cities are the result of many factors, including federal, state, and local housing policies, private housing discrimination, migration patterns, public education systems, employment opportunities, mortgage practices, and the country's interstate highway system.
So this is just an example of the reality that varies very differently from the narrative that is always put out there, right? The narrative is, like it says, it wants to blame individuals for poor choices that they make that leaves them in conditions that they are. But the truth is, you know, and for the history of this country, there are many factors that contribute to why you know, brown and black people in the United States are in the bottom of societies and going through the things that we're going through. You know, factors like federal, state, and local housing policies. I don't know if you know about redlining, but that is something that they use to limit where black and brown people can purchase homes. Housing discrimination, where they went out of their way to stop blacks and browns from buying certain houses in certain neighborhoods, migration patterns, public education systems. Once the affluent left certain neighborhoods, what that did was take away the tax dollars that go towards the education system and makes education systems in our areas a lot less well funded, which has a big effect on the education, the quality of education that our children are getting, right? Obviously, employment opportunities, mortgage practices, and what we're gonna read about is the interstate highway systems. Go ahead.
Con. Construction of the interstate highway system played a key role in creating the spatial and economic conditions prevalent in urban centers today. Conditions that influence interracial interactions, economic mobility, and community stability. Indeed, highway construction, both symbolically and physically, encourage racial segregation and isolation. The passage of the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, popularly known as the National Interstate and Defense Highway Act, or the Interstate Highway Act, buoyed both highway construction and the destruction of black communities. Often under the guise of slum removal, federal and state officials purposely targeted black communities to make way for massive highway projects. In states around the country, highways disproportionately displaced black households and cut the heart and soul out of thriving black communities as homes, churches, schools, and businesses were destroyed. In some cases, entire black communities were leveled. In St. Paul, Minnesota, the construction of Interstate 94 displaced 1/7 of the city's black residents. As one observer noted, very few blacks lived in Minnesota, but the road builders found them. Similarly, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a black community known as the Hill District was devastated in order to build Interstate 579. When Interstate 579 opened to traffic, it had effectively cut off the Hill District from Pittsburgh's thriving downtown area and displaced thousands of black residents. The population of the Hill District dropped from approximately 54,000 in 1950 to approximately 9,500 in 2013. More than 400 businesses were lost. When you displace that many people, you essentially damn that community. So it should be no surprise that today, approximately 14% of the Hill District's residents live below the poverty line.
They completely destroyed that community, and it's no wonder today that 40% of that district's residents live below the poverty line. But they will have you believe that it is due to poor decisions that the people in these communities have made, but that's obviously not the case. Go ahead.
In other communities, the highway spared black homes but became a permanent racial barrier between white and black neighborhoods, further entrenching racial segregation and walling off economic opportunity. This was often accomplished at the request of white residents who feared integration. In Orlando, Florida, Interstate 4 was built to provide a barrier separating black residents on the west side of town from white residents and the central business district on the east side. In Los Angeles, California, the highway system was designed to serve the dual purposes of segregation and isolation. The Los Angeles freeway created a barrier to the blight of downtown and allowed those coming from Pasadena or other eastern suburbs to bypass it. Thus, highways in Los Angeles work to hide the brutal violence of racial segregation and also help to maintain it.
And it's very clear today. I don't know if you're familiar with LA, but as you travel around the city, you can see very clearly how areas north of certain highways or south of certain highways have different looks. They have different feels. They have different people living in those communities, and it's clear that the city takes care of those areas in different ways. So that's just an example of some of the curses that we see in the city. I have something here about some of the curses that we see in the fields today, right? This is migrant farm workers, our nation's invisible population, and this is by Eduardo Gonzalez Jr. I'll read some of this. So between 1 and 3 migrant farm workers leave their homes every year to plant, cultivate, harvest, and pack fruits, vegetables, and nuts in the U.S. Although invisible to most people, the presence of migrant farm workers in many rural communities throughout the nation is undeniable, since hand labor is still necessary for the production of blemish-free fruits and vegetables that consumers demand. Who are the migrant farm workers? Migrant farm workers are predominantly Mexican-born sons, husbands, and fathers who leave what is familiar and comfortable with the hopes and dreams of making enough money to support their families back home, feed themselves, purchase land and a home, and, like many immigrants who came before them, ultimately return to their homeland. While others come from countries such as Jamaica, Haiti, Guatemala, Honduras, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic, and other states in the United States, their aspirations remain the same. They are young, average about 31 years of age. Some arrive as single men, while others leave their families behind while they seek work, and others travel and work with their families. For those who travel without their families, once they realize that they will need to maintain their U.S. earning capacity, they would much rather have their families settle with them in the U.S. More than half of all farm workers, 52 of every 100, are unauthorized workers with no legal status in the United States. These are the people who are doing the manual labor to fill our grocery stores, with the produce that we enjoy today. That's crazy that they go through all this work to provide for us, and they're unauthorized. They have no legal statuses. They have no legal rights. This is very similar to servitude or slavery. Keep reading. Many farm workers arrive with solid agricultural skills, firmly grounded in practical experience and working knowledge of agriculture. This expertise is complemented by a strong work ethic, deeply rooted in their commitment to provide for their families or make it on their own. This is reflected in their willingness to make considerable sacrifices in order to guarantee a more prosperous future for their extended families, their children, and or their siblings. These sacrifices range from separation from their countries of origin, families, and what is familiar to learning to navigate a foreign land where little is known about them and whose customs, languages, foods, and ways of life are different from what they know. In many instances, this new place brings about feelings of alienation or isolation. No longer is La Plazia a central gathering place in town for community interaction and fellowship in the countries of origin available to them. Instead, loneliness creeps in for many as they are limited to the boundaries of the farm due in part to limited access to transportation and also their lack of legal status, which reduces their access to neighborhood businesses, services, and community activities in general. Fear of being picked up by Immigration and Nationalization Services, or INS, due to their undocumented status causes many farm workers to go into hiding in their communities so that they work and live and further contribute to the isolation that the farm workers routinely experience. So in many ways, migrant farm workers work in settings that do not mirror those of the majority of the nation's working populace. In spite of these challenges, for many, the hopes and dreams of making more money in the US than in their countries of origin is enough to drive them to make these enormous sacrifices. Many experience great pride in their contribution that they make to society through their labor, for they realize their work feeds the world. For these farm workers, there is also a sense of accomplishment in their ability to support their families in purchasing homes or going to school in their home country. For others, their hopes and dreams do not always materialize to the degree envisioned and promised, with 61% of U.S. farm workers' income falling below the poverty level. A median income of less than $7,500 a year leave many feeling trapped with no other valuable options outside of farm work, and with the shame and indignity of returning to their homelands with less than what they came. And we'll go into this a little later on, but basically what's happening is, people are coming over here looking for a better life, and because of the lack of opportunities and the lack of care or support that this country has for them, they're literally put in between a rock and a hard place where, they can't go back home, sometimes out of having less than, returning home with less than what they left with, and sometimes because they don't have the financial means to better themselves here, right? So, this is something that only our people see. Other nations can come over here and they get grants and they get loans to open up businesses in our neighborhoods and thrive off of the dollars that we make. We don't get those opportunities, right? These are more curses that we experience as children of the Most High who have gone against what the Most High has commanded us to do. So let's. And that's, we'll see that even reflected in verse 17.
Deuteronomy 28:17. Cursed shall be thy basket and thy store.
No, here the basket is talking about the actual food that we are able to gather and make for ourselves. We don't have the opportunities to farm for ourselves. We're not really blessed with these opportunities. So we have to go to the grocery stores and get what we can, hoping that the food that's provided for us is on the up and up, that it's healthy and it's not it's going to be nourishing. And a lot of times there's a lot of things that are done to the foods that aren't that sometimes harm us, right?
Can I chime in on that?
Yeah, you got that.
Yeah, so cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. You know, even in a lot of our communities, you have what's called food deserts. We're in the middle of a food
Right.
desert. We're not in any places where we can locally source our food, where we can reliably get to food. All our food is carted in on the truck by the truckers
Right.
from far distances away. And that happens in a lot of the poorest sections of these cities. So, and a lot of times that food is of a lower quality as well. So we're getting the worst of the crop from the farthest away, which is why it expires faster, it seems like. But if you find yourself going into some more affluent neighborhood, you'll see that, theirs has a longer expiration date. Theirs looks better. You know what I'm saying? So,
Not only that, but you know they have a lot more avenues. There are a lot more you know places, stores that they can go to. You know, they've got multiple grocery stores that they have available in their neighborhoods to pick and choose from. You know, we don't have those opportunities. You know, we've got, you know, the little corner stores or the liquor stores. You know, we've got an abundance of liquor stores, but, you know, try to find, you know, some decent food at a decent grocery store, you're going to be hard pressed.
there's a there's a lot of food shortages happen right now, but is
Right.
there a liquor shortage? Is there
Absolutely not.
Is there a cigarette shortage?
Definitely not.
You know?
These things are always going to be available. Let's read 18.
Con. Deuteronomy 28:18. Cursed shall be the fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy land, the increase of thy kind, and the flocks of thy sheep.
We're going to read an excerpt from Open Veins of Latin America, and this is going to explain the curses of the fruit of the body and the fruit of thy land a little better. Go ahead with that when you're ready.
From the Open Veins of Latin America. One French economist argues that Latin America's worst colonial legacy, which explains its backwardness today, is lack of capital. But all the historical evidence shows that the colonial economy produced bountiful wealth for the classes connected internally with the colonial system of domination. The labor that was abundantly available for Latin American products made possible a precocious and abundant accumulation of capital in the Iberian colonies. The hard core of beneficiaries, far from growing, became smaller in proportion to the mass of the population, as may be seen from the well-known fact that unemployed Europeans and Creoles constantly increased. The capital that stayed in Latin America after the lion's share went into the primitive accumulation process of European capitalism did not generate a process similar to that which took place in Europe, where the foundations of industrial development were laid. It was diverted instead into the construction of great palaces and showy churches, in the purchase of jewels and luxurious clothing and furniture, into the maintenance of flocks of servants, and then into the extravagance of fiestas. To an important extent, this surplus was also immobilized in the purchase of new lands, or continued to revolve around speculative commercial activities. In the twilight of the colonial era, Alexander von Humboldt found in Mexico an enormous amount of capital in the hands of mine owners and merchants, while no less than half of Mexican real estate and capital belonged to the church, which also controlled much of the remaining land through mortgages.
So basically what's happening is our people are putting in the work, our people are tilling the land, our people are doing all the hard labor, and the oppressors are taking this money and shipping it back to their homelands in Europe, or they're using that money for extravagant and luxurious items, jewelry, clothing, and furniture. showy churches. You know, these things don't help the people. It just further puts the people into poverty, right? And you know, this is just another curse that we face as a people who have disobeyed the Most High God. Let's get 19.
God. Verse 19. Cursed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and cursed shalt thou be when thou goest out.
When we are born, a lot of times we are born into undesirable situations, you know, whether it be, you know, single parent homes. That is something that is higher with our people than with any of these other nations. Whether it be, you know, being born into poverty, you know, being born into, you know, abusive relationships, you know, domestic violence, being born in undesirable areas. You know, it's tough living in the hood, right? There's a lot of violence, a lot of poverty. There's all kinds of things that we have to deal with when we're born into. We start at a lower level than these other nations, and there is a steeper hill for us to climb just to get to a point where we are level where these other nations start out. And then, you know, we struggle throughout most of our lives, and we don't have the opportunities that these other nations have. You know, we end up, you know, working our whole lives, beating up our bodies, beating up our minds, and you know, killing ourselves just to try to get by and support ourselves and our families, and end up, you know, dying without things like, you know, inheritance to leave down to our loved ones, or even simple things like life insurance to cover the funeral expenses. These are curses that we experience when we come in and when we go out. These are things that, you know, we experience as Israelites, blacks and browns, and Native Americans, that these other nations are not typically going through. Let's go to 20.
Verse 20. The Lord shall send upon thee cursing, vexation, and rebuke, and all that thou settest thine hand unto, for to do until thou be destroyed, and until thou perish quickly, because of the wickedness of thy doings, whereby thou hast forsaken me.
You know, we suffer all kinds of unfortunate situations, and I don't know if you feel free to chime in at any time. You know, we are the ones who are the ones who are being oppressed. You know, we experience all kinds of troubles in our lives. You know, most of our lives are filled with discomforts, with confusion. We're the ones being punished. We're the ones being rebuked by the Most High. You know, this nation makes it very difficult for us to better ourselves. There are a lot of, not a lot, but there are certain things that they put out there that are supposed to help us, right? Welfare, you know, different programs for bettering education. But the steps that we have to overcome just to obtain these opportunities are incredible. They're incredibly high, and they make it incredibly difficult for us. And they do that on purpose, right? Because the goal isn't to get us to equal footing. The goal is to keep us in oppression. The goal is to keep us under all these other nations.
And just to chime in on that, it says that all that thou settest thine hand unto, for to do until thou be destroyed, and until thou perish quickly. So I was talking to my grandfather some while ago, and it was during the time when, during those past couple of summers, when there was these huge Black Lives Matter protests throughout the summer, protesting police violence and all that. You know, and we're still getting persecuted in that way. But I asked my grandpa, have you ever seen anything this crazy, Grandpa? Oh, the whole world's on our side, it seems like. You know, they're all, you know, we're getting all this on cameras going out. And he was like, it ain't nothing new.
Right.
You know, it's just the first time it's been televised.
Right.
You know, so the same things we're going through, our forefathers, foremothers, they went through, you know. And these curses have been following us, pursuing us, and cutting off each of our generations, you know, vexing each of our generations. And it says, until thou be destroyed. You can go back as far as you want. Every decade, every couple of years has some crazy big event about how our people are being persecuted, vexed, trodden under, you know, so.
Here, you know, we had the LA riots. You know, we've always had protests. We've always had marchings and all kind of events where we come together in the name of bettering ourselves, right? And it's not getting any better. The only way that we're going to get out of these conditions is turning back to doing what the Most High has asked us to do, and that's following these laws, statutes, and commandments. That's right. Let's grab 21.
And, you know, just real quick, too, you got certain people who, they hear the curses and they're like, oh, so there's nothing that we can do. What about all the people doing X, Y, and Z and how they're able to, you know, get up and make something of themselves? But when you look up places like Tulsa, what happened in Tulsa, or Black Wall Street, or look up any black massacre, or just any, there are times when we as a people are able to get up and make something of ourselves and come up on high, but what always happens when we don't follow these commandments, those places are burned down and destroyed. You know, we just read how these freeways earlier, they designed the freeways and they were like, well, where are we gonna put them? Let's run them right through all these black communities, all these Mexican communities, all the people we hate. We're gonna run these freeways through them. So that's what happens. We're an industrious people. We're a creative people. We're a people blessed by the Most High God. And we're always going to find a way to make something of ourselves. But until we come back to these laws, statutes, and commandments, somebody's going to come and burn it down.
That's right.
You want verse 20?
21.
Con. The Lord shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee until he have consumed thee from off the land whither thou goest to possess it.
So this is epidemics in America. This is from epicworldhistory.blogspot.com. This is an article that someone wrote. It starts, Central Mexico is the most intensively studied region according to the impact of European diseases on indigenous demography, where in 1520 there lived an estimated 25 million native people. In 1620, there lived some 730,000. That's a decline of 97% in 100 years, attributed overwhelmingly to disease. Similar catastrophes unfolded across the hemisphere. The most precipitous decline is thought to have occurred in the Caribbean, where the pre-contact indigenous population of several million had been all but exterminated by 1550. Colonial North America. The Pilgrims in Massachusetts, and the first Europeans to settle on the coast of Maryland and Virginia found a near empty country. Almost 9/10 of the former Native American populations had been wiped out by smallpox in an epidemic from 1618 through 19. John Winthrop, a leader of colonial Massachusetts, commented in 1684, for the native, they are near all dead of the smallpox, so as the Lord hath cleared our title to what we possess. This Puritan leader and others felt that the disease was God's plan to make land available for the Europeans by eliminating the Native Americans who had previously occupied it. It's crazy that they thought that, right? But he might not have been wrong, right? You know, these are the curses. This is another part of the curses that we face for disobeying the Most High. In some cases, smallpox was spread to the North American indigenous peoples intentionally as a form of germ warfare. During the American Revolution, American troops were victims of the disease during a campaign in Quebec. George Washington successfully had the susceptible American troops inoculated. British troops who had grown up in England and Ireland had immunity to these diseases. By the time George Vancouver explored the Pacific coast of what became Washington State in the province of British Columbia, he found entire villages of Native Americans in ruins and deserted with skeletons lying all around. By the 20th century, smallpox has wiped out as much as 90% of the pre-conquest Native American population. In some, the impact of hitherto known European diseases on indigenous societies unleashed a demographic cataclysm across the Western Hemisphere, representing one of the most important chapters in the history of the pre-conquest Americas, whose characteristics and impacts scholars are still grappling to comprehend. So basically, Europeans came over here and they brought the diseases that they had built up an immunity to and infected all the indigenous people, wiping them out by the thousands. And once they wiped them out, they took the land for themselves and built the land up for themselves, right? You know, these aren't things that these other nations are experiencing or having to deal with or go through. You know, these are curses that the Most High put on us. You got anything?
Con. And you know what they called that? They called that manifest destiny.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? They spun it so that this is a bright footnote in their history book. I remember being a young kid in history class. It seemed like when you're in elementary school, they talk about this every year, American Revolution,
right,
going right into manifest destiny and how God gave us from sea to shining sea.
Right.
But how did they get it? Disease warfare,
right?
Biological
Violence.
warfare, killing the animals, the buffalo,
right,
on purpose.
Right.
They didn't even eat them. They just shot them literally to diminish the tribes that existed there.
Oh, we're going to get into it.
Right?
We're going to get into it.
But even today, they spun it as something positive for them, and that's what we have to recognize. The things they're spinning as positivity for them, you got to watch out that it's not a smallpox blanket. You know,
right?
They're giving you a blanket to keep you warm.
Right.
Can you trust that?
Right. You know. Let's grab 22.
Verse 22. The Lord shall smite thee with a consumption, and with a fever, and with an inflammation, and with an extreme burning, and with the sword, and with blasting, and with mildew, and they shall pursue thee until thou perish.
These other nations, you know, it's almost second nature to them to have a desire of rulership and leadership and destroying us as a people, and they do it with a fever and an inflammation. It's an extreme burning. They can't help themselves to bring their swords out and to completely decimate us and destroy us as a people, you know. And we can see that with, you know, an example is the American police violence against black people. Go ahead and read that.
Salak.
You're good.
So, American police violence against black people. Violence against black men and women at the hands of white authority is foundational to the United States and continues to influence its policing culture to this day. Precursors to modern-day American police departments include violent slave patrols utilized in southern states before the Civil War. Then the legal enforcement of racist black codes, followed by Jim Crow laws. Early municipal departments in growing U.S. cities were overwhelmingly white and brutalized vulnerable communities routinely. Thousands of lynchings of black Americans by white vigilantes went unpunished by the judicial system. And during the civil rights era and well beyond, peaceful protest has been harshly suppressed by officers sworn to protect and serve.
There's nothing new under the sun. This is something that they've been doing from the beginning. From the beginning of this country. You know, they enslaved us, brutalized us, to unimaginable measures, right? And what they've done as the years and the generations have continued is just figured out a way to be less and less obvious about the ways that they oppress us. But nothing has changed. It's still us on the bottom. It's still us that are being oppressed. It's still us that are being destroyed violently, by this nation. Let's grab 23.
Verse 23, and the heaven that is over thy head shall be brass, and the earth that is under thee shall be iron.
And you might be able to speak to this one. This is not you personally. This is just an example of being stuck between a rock and a hard place, and that's something that a lot of our people are familiar with. You know, a lot of our people, get stuck into positions where there's really no easy or comfortable solution to the situations that we're put in. You know, we're stuck between two difficult choices. You know, it's something that we experience more often than these other nations by far, and this is just another example of curses that we face as a people that these other nations don't have to really deal with. I don't know if you have anything on that. Let's grab 24.
Verse 24, the Lord shall make the rain of thy land powder and dust. From heaven shall it come down upon thee until thou be destroyed.
This is, famines that we've had to deal with. And that is likely on the horizon. If you look around today, there are a ton of food producing factories that are being destroyed, that are catching on fire all through the country with no explanation, no rhyme or reason. Farmers are being paid to destroy their crops. We are on the verge of famine, just like the Bible speaks of. Let's grab 25.
Verse 25, the Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them, and flee 7 ways before them, and shalt be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth.
The Most High said that he was going to scatter us throughout the 4 corners of the earth, right? And we see that, our people are vast, but also we're everywhere.
You can look at the wars between the Native Americans and the Europeans that came over here. You can look at the Africans that put up a fight to the colonial powers that try to take them, Unfortunately, they ended up losing. They were smitten. They fell by the sword to pestilence, however it went, and then they were captured and they were sold, scattered all across the world.
This is just a little excerpt from Counting the Dead, estimating the loss of life in the indigenous Holocaust. This is 1492 to present. You know, in 1492 was when Columbus, you know, so-called discovered, you know, the Americas. This is by David Michael Smith. At the turn of the 20th century, the total number of native inhabitants living in the entire Western Hemisphere had declined to 4 or 4.5 million. In the 1800s, only about 600,000 indigenous people remained in the coterminous United States. By the 1900s, the indigenous population in the country had reached its lowest point of about 237,000 people. The size of the indigenous population in the hemisphere and this country then began to grow again and increase appreciably during the past century. Today, about 70 million indigenous people live in the Western Hemisphere. There are now approximately 7.25 million American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians in the U.S. In view of the historically unprecedented and unspeakably tragic depopulation that unfolded after 1492, the survival of the indigenous people is truly extraordinary. However, even today, legacy of invasion, conquest, colonialism continues to exact a terrible human toll. So even through all of the things that these nations have put us through, you know, we still continue to thrive, and we still continue to grow as a people and fill this land. And this is a testament to the Most High. Even though he's punishing us, you know, we're still doing what we do as a people. Let's grab 26.
Verse 26. And thy carcass shall be meat unto all fowls of the air, and unto the beasts of the earth, and no man shall fray them away.
This is talking about you know, our bodies. We're literally there are instances where we're literally being killed in the fields, and we're not being buried, or we're not being taken care of. We end up being meat into the vultures and the scavengers of the land and air. This is another way that this manifests itself is through diseases, and this is an excerpt from Chronic Diseases in Latin America, Problems and Solutions for Health Systems. The burden of disease in Latin American countries is significantly different from other regions and other low-income middle-class countries in particular. The Latin American countries' non-communicable diseases are 13 to 16 percentage points higher than in any other region, accounting for 66.7% of the deaths and 65% of dailies. We have the highest percentages of deaths in Latin America as compared to these other countries and regions. And you know, this is just another way that we are being destroyed as a people. Let's, you want to grab 27?
Verse 27. The Lord will smite thee with the botch of Egypt, and with the hemorrhoids, and with the scab, and with the itch, whereof thou canst not be healed.
Because of the lag to nutritious foods that we face, that we brought out earlier, you know, being in food deserts and whatnot, we are suspect to all kinds of diseases due to our poor health, right? You know, we experience you know, tumors, cancers. You know, smallpox was something that devastated us.
Even going as far as STDs.
Right, absolutely. And you know, these are things. Diabetes. There's all kinds of diseases that are destroying our communities due to a lack of availability to you know, healthy and nutritious foods. It's easy in our communities to find junk foods and snack foods, but it's difficult to find fresh fruits and vegetables and nutritious foods that a lot of these other nations have readily available. Let's grab 29, and then we're gonna move kind of quickly through these.
Verse 29, and thou shalt grope at noonday. Oh, Slakia. Verse 28. The Lord shall smite thee with madness and blindness and astonishment of heart. And just 29?
Sure.
And thou shalt grope at noondays as the blind gropeth in darkness, and thou shalt not prosper in thy ways, and thou shalt be only oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall save thee.
Because of the state of our oppression and because of our you know, us being a stiff-necked people and not wanting to do what the Most High has commanded us to do, you know, we experience all kinds of issues, mental health issues that damage us, that you know, make us mad. We experience you know, depression. We experience a high amount of domestic abuse, drug and alcohol abuse. You know, these are things that are very high in our communities, and you know, this is due to us not wanting to, not only being damaged by these other nations, but us not wanting to come back and do the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High. You know, a lot of us are not even interested in the Bible or what it has to say. You know, we feel like, you know, this is you know, the white man's book, and we're not even interested in having a discussion about it. You know, as soon as you go to bring it out, people are not interested. Yeah, that's not for me, and you know, these are just things that we experience as people who the Most High has blinded us, and he has taken away our ability a lot of times to even want to know what the truth is, or to even have a desire for something more. You know, that's how damaged we are. Let's grab 30.
Verse 30. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build a house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, and shalt not gather the grapes thereof.
So I'm sure you've heard about, you know, slave masters who had their way with our women, who you know, slept with multiple of our wives and our daughters, and you know, basically had their way with them and destroyed our women and had children with our women, right? We deal with a lot of infidelity today as well. You know, it's popular for our brothers to sleep with other brothers, you know, girlfriends or wives, and we know in the truth that is adultery. That is, you know, it's against the law to sleep with another man's wife. But you know, that's a popular thing in our culture. You know, I can't tell you how many songs I've heard of you know, stealing another man's wife or sleeping with another man's wife, and somehow that makes you more of a man. It's just ridiculous. But you know, it's just another thing that we place that the Most High has put on us. Another part of that is when you look throughout this country and you look at the people who are actually building up the foundations of these countries, who are actually building up our buildings, building up our homes, it's our people. You know, we're the one that are actually putting in the labor, and we are not we are not given the opportunities to take advantage of our labors. We're not building these homes and these buildings for us to dwell in. It's for these other nations to dwell in, right? And that's just another part of the things that we face as a people. We can grab 31.
Verse 31. Thine ox shall be slain before thine eyes, and thou shalt not eat thereof. Thine ass shall be slain violently, taken away from before thy face, and shall not be restored to thee. Thy sheep shall be given unto thine enemies, and thou shalt have none to rescue them.
I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but we're gonna read about the American buffalo, spirit of a nation, and this is something that our oppressors did to basically spoil us. Go ahead and read that.
American buffalo, spirit of a nation. In the 1500s, however, things began to change. First, Spanish explorers introduced horses to the region. By the 1800s, Native Americans had learned to use the speedy steeds to chase bison, dramatically expanding their hunting range and effectiveness. Next, guns made their way into the hands of buffalo hunters, making them increasingly deadly hunters. But it was that arrival of vast waves of white settlers in the 1800s and their conflict with the Native American residents of the prairies that spelled the end up for the buffalo. Among the earliest waves of settlers were trappers and traders, people who made their living selling meats and hides. By the 1870s, they were shipping hundreds of thousands of buffalo hides eastward each year. More than 1.5 million were packed aboard trains and wagons in the winter of 1872 to 73 alone. The commercial killers, however, weren't the only ones shooting bison. Train companies offered tourists the chance to shoot buffalo from the windows of their coaches, pausing only when they ran out of ammunition or the gun's barrel became too hot. There were even buffalo killing contests.
They made a game out of destroying our livelihood. You got it?
In one, a Kansan set a record by killing 120 bison in just 40 minutes.
That's crazy.
Buffalo Bill Cody, hired to slaughter the animals, killed more than 4,000 buffalo in just 2 years. Some U.S. government officials even promoted the destruction of the bison herds as a way to defeat their Native American enemies, who were resisting the takeover of their lands by white settlers. One congressman, James Throckmorton of Texas, believed that it would be a great step forward in the civilization of the Indians and the preservation of peace on the border if there was not a buffalo in existence. Soon, military commanders were ordering their troops to kill buffalo, not for food, but to deny Native Americans their own source of food. One general believed that buffalo hunters did more to defeat the Indian nations in a few years than soldiers did in 50. By 1880, the slaughter was almost over, where millions of buffalo once roamed. Only a few thousand animals remained. Soon their numbers dwindled with the largest wild herd, just a few hundred animals, sheltered in the isolated valleys of the newly created Yellowstone National Park.
Look at all the ways this other nation has used to destroy us. You know, these are things that these other nations are not going through. We are the only people that are facing these things. Let's grab 32.
Verse 32 of Deuteronomy 28.
Yes, sir.
Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand.
Slavery and America's legacy of family separation. I'm going to read a little excerpt from this. I know very well that forced family separation was always a fixture in the lives of enslaved people. Enslaved children, after all, were a lucrative business. This was certainly the case in the city of Lexington, Kentucky, the site of one of the most important slave markets in the state. The market, like others across the nation, was a terrifying place for enslaved children who performed necessary labor even while young. The expansion and maintenance and future of slavery as an economic system depended on these children, particularly after the close of the American transatlantic slave trade in 1808. Former slaves from Lexington, Kentucky, who were enslaved as children, testified to their fear, pain, and horror in WPA narratives, interviews conducted during the Great Depression. These children, even from a young age, were well aware that their sale could occur at any moment. That's terrifying. Harriet Mason remembered her mistress forcing her to leave her home and family in Bryantsville, Kentucky, to work in Lexington as a servant at the age of 7 years old. Imagine that. She remembered, when we got to Lexington, I tried to run off and go back to Bryantsville to see my mother. The grief of a childhood spent away from her family at the whim of her owner led her to suicidal thoughts. I used to say I wish I died when I was little. Even in her old age, she was firm that I never liked to go to Lexington since. Her recollections captured the cruelty of family separation and underscored how children were big business in the history of slavery. They were laborers and valuable property. They could be hired out just like Harriet Mason. Slaveholders borrowed against their human property. They gifted enslaved children to other white sons and daughters as children upon their marriages, or as they struck out to begin their slave-holding legacy. And for course, slave children could be sold down the road and down the river. Children knew that at any moment this could happen to them. For example, George Scruggs, an ex-slave whose owner hired him out as a child to work in Lexington, remembered his fear when seeing a slave coffle. The colored folks were going downtown to be sold when I first saw them coming. I got scared and started to run. This is just another way that they destroyed us, by breaking up our families, by taking our children away from us. And you know, they never saw their children again. Sold off into slavery. It's just crazy. Let's get Deuteronomy 28 and 33.
God. Deuteronomy 28:33. The fruit of thy land and all thy labors shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt only be oppressed and crushed always.
This is you want to read this? This is an excerpt from, actually, you know what? Read the De-Emancipation Act.
The D.C. Emancipation Act.
Yes.
On April 16, 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed a bill ending slavery in the District of Columbia. Passage of this law came 8.5 months before Lincoln issued his Emancipation Proclamation. The act brought to a conclusion decades of agitation aimed at ending what anti-slavery advocates called the national shame of slavery in the nation's capital. It provided for immediate emancipation, compensation to former owners who were loyal to the Union of up to $300 for each freed slave, voluntary colonization of former slaves to locations outside the U.S., and payments up to $100 for each person choosing emigration. Over the next 9 months, the Board of Commissioners appointed to administer the act approved 930 petitions, completely or in part from former owners, for the freedom of 2,900 former slaves.
So even in abolishing slavery, right? These slave owners were paid for each slave that they had. The destroyers coming in and the destroyers going out. You know,
They got that reimbursement.
man, it's just amazing the ways that they find to continue to profit off of our backs and off of our necks. Go ahead and read 34.
Verse 34, so that thou shalt be mad for the sign of thine eyes, which thou shalt see.
This is something going over African Americans and the unique medical health risks that we face. African Americans who are more likely to be impoverished, incarcerated, homeless, and fighting substance abuse are all at a higher risk for poor mental health, while poverty, homelessness, drug abuse, and etc. are often signs of mental health illnesses across all ethnicities. Racism is an added part to poor mental health in African Americans. While negative stereotypes and attitudes of rejection might be, I guess, openly displayed today, examples of racism are many, and it has consequences. Although research on one connection between racism and mental health is limited. Of course it's limited. No one is really studying that. You know, that's something that only our people experience. There's a graphic here. 13.4% of the U.S. population identifies as Black or African American, and of those, over 16% reported having mental illness in the past year, and that's only those that are willing to actually who can A, recognize it, and B, are willing to report it, right? And that itself is over 7 million people, and that's more people than the populations of Chicago, Houston, and Philadelphia combined. Our people are really going through it. Let's grab 35 and 35.
Verse 35, the Lord shall smite thee in the knees and in the legs with a sore botch that cannot be healed from the sole of thy foot unto the top of thy head.
Again, going into all the different diseases that we face as a people, just because of the conditions that we're put in, the opportunities that aren't available to us. We suffer all kinds of diseases like arthritis, varicose veins, diabetes, all kinds of things that destroy our bodies. Let's grab 36.
The Lord shall bring thee and thy king, which thou shalt set over thee, unto a nation which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, and there shalt thou serve other gods, wood and stone.
There are all kinds of examples of our people being punished through religious zealousness, right? But what I'm going to read is the Reglamento. And this is a legal document drawn up in 1513 to be read before initiation of the conquest of the Amerindians. The famous 1511 sermon from the Dominican friar Antonio de Montesinos, raising the question of Spanish mistreatment of the native peoples of the land of Hispaniola, led to a review of whether or not conquest of the New World was justified, and if so, under what conditions. Spanish jurist Juan Lopez de Palacios Rubios articulated the rationale for Spanish action in the treaties of the Ocean Isles in 1513. He argued, as did Bishop Hostinius earlier, that people could annul political jurisdictions of heathens and transfer them to Christian princes, as Pope Alexander VI had done for the Spanish in the bulls of donation of 1493. Let's read some of that. So this is by Charles I of Spain. Spanish conquistadors read this document composed in 1514 to Indians of the New World. It briefly explains Spain's assertion of its legal and moral right to rule over the inhabitants of Latin America. It also provides a rationale for a just war. Legalistic Spaniards devised the doctrine so that you could legally enslave Indians who refused to agree with the statements of the Reglamento. Notice the dire warning in the last paragraph to those who do not submit. Of course, not knowing Latin, most Indians had no idea what transpired with the reading, but found themselves enslaved nonetheless. Let's read that real quick. Actually, I got it here. On behalf of the king and the queen, subjectors of barbarous people, we, their servants, notify and make known to you as best we are able that God, our Lord, living and eternal, that's definitely not the Most High God, created the heavens and the earth, and a man and a woman of whom you and we and all other people of the world were and are the descendants. There's a long history of these people stealing our identity. This is just another example, right? Because of the great number of people who have come from the union of these two in 5,000 years, which have run their course since the world was created, it has become necessary that some should go in one direction and that others should go in another. Thus, they become divided into many kingdoms and many provinces, since they could not all remain or sustain themselves in one place. Of all these people, God, our Lord, chose one, who was called Saint Peter, to be the Lord and the one who was to be superior to all the other people of the world, whom all should obey. He was to be the head of the entire human race, wherever men might exist. God gave him the world for his kingdom and jurisdiction. God also permitted him to be and established himself in any other part of the world to judge and govern all people, whether Christian, Moors, Jew, Gentiles, or those of any other sex and belief that there might be. He was called the Pope. Consequently, as we best may, we beseech and demand that you understand fully this that we have said to you and ponder it, so that you may understand and deliberate upon it for a just and fair period, and that you accept the church and superior organization of the whole world and recognize the supreme pontiff called the Pope, and that his name you acknowledge the king and queen as the lords and superior authorities of the islands and mainlands by virtue of the said donation. If you do not do this, however, or resort maliciously to delay, we warn you that with the aid of God, we will enter your land against you with a force and will make war in every place and by every means that we can and are able. And we will then subject you to the yoke and authority of the church and their highness. We will take you and your wives and your children and make them slaves. And as such, we will sell them, and we will dispose of you and them as their highnesses ordered. And we will take your property, and we will do to you all the harm and evil we can, as is done to vassals who will not obey their lord, or who will not wish to accept him or to resist and defy him. We avow that the deaths and harm which you will receive thereby will be your own blame, and not that of their highnesses, nor ours, nor of the gentlemen who came with us. they took our history and our word and basically turned it against us to destroy us. This is something that they've done throughout history. This is something that they continue to do to this day. This is why it's important to know who you are and to understand these curses and to come back to doing what the Most High has asked us to do. We got to obey these laws, statutes, and commandments. Let's read 37.
And just real quick on that, for verse 36, we'll serve gods of wood and stone. You know, it's talking about the Christian cross, and then you got the Kaaba stone in the Muslim religion, right? So basically, you look at the two dominant religions in the world. You got Christian Catholicism and Islam. And when you look at who spread their religion by the sword and where they spread it, boom, you got the Americas and you got Africa. You know, the Americas being majority Catholics and Africa being, I think majority Muslim.
Absolutely.
You know, so a lot of Catholicism in there too, though. But yeah, and they spread it by the sword, and how this particular curse says, the Lord shall bring thee and thy king, which thou shalt set over thee. So why did they bring it to the king? This very letter he read was brought to the Incan king, right? Or the Mayan king. But it was brought to all those kings in South America. Hey, convert and serve us, or die and go into slavery.
Right.
You know, the same thing the Muslims did. You got it from the Crusades all the way up into Columbus time and even now.
Yeah, there's nothing new under the sun. This is the way that they continue to destroy us to this day. Go ahead with 37.
Verse 37, and thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee.
We are astonishment, for example, in the way that we are able to dominate physically in sports, for example, or in entertainment, for example. We are a proverb and byword in that they name us and call us all kinds of things, but who we are, Israelites. There's you can look this up yourself. It's called the racial slur database. It consists of racial slurs for all races, right? For a lot of the races out there, right? There are 612 slurs for blacks, which is like 3 times as many as any other represented race in the database. And I won't even go into some of them that I have there. Let's grab. We're gonna go through 38 through 41 really quickly.
Read the whole thing?
I'll stop you. You got it.
Verse 38, thou shalt carry much seed out into the field, and shalt gather but little in, for the locust shall consume it.
So again, this is us being the ones who are doing most of all of the manual labor throughout history for these other nations. We put in all the hard work, and they're the ones who benefit from it, right? And what we've seen in the past and what we are seeing is through their efforts, they are destroying the resources that are available. They're literally destroying this world and consuming it, just like locusts do when they come through and sweep a field. They destroy everything that's in there. Go ahead and grab 39.
Verse 39, thou shalt plant vineyards and dress them, but shalt neither drink of the wine nor gather the grapes, for the worms shall eat them. Even to our best efforts, right, we aren't as prosperous as these other nations, right? We can go out and a lot of us try all kinds of different ways of bettering ourselves and being prosperous. And
Maybe we get lucky with one or two when we're trying, 10, 15 different things. This is just another way that, we are cursed. Our efforts aren't as bountiful as these other nations. Go ahead with 40.
Verse 40, thou shalt have olive trees throughout all thy coasts, but thou shalt not anoint thyself with the oil, for thine olive shall cast his fruit.
Even when we are able to, get a decent job and work hard and able to, put away some funds to buy a nice vehicle or to, put yourself in a nice home, to be able to put a little bit of money away in savings, we're not able to enjoy the resources that we have. We're not able to, spend time with our families like we would like to. We've got to work, every day, 5 out of 7 days, at sometimes even longer. We don't have time to spend with our families. We don't have the opportunity to raise our children like we would like. Because we have to work. We don't have the opportunity to take our family on vacations and trips like we would like to. We don't have the time to spend in our homes to relax and enjoy the fruits of our labor like we would like to. This is just another way that we are being destroyed. Let's do 41.
God, thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity.
So it's illegal for you not to send your children to school. You have to send your children to school, whether it be public or private school, right? And through sending your children to school to be taught by these other nations, you really don't have any control of what they're learning, what they're experiencing, what's being taught to them. And these people aren't teaching your children with what's best for your children, right? They learn all kinds of madness that these other nations are using to destroy our people. So we don't have the opportunity to take care of our children like we'd like to. Our children are taken away from us through things like child protective services or having to go through to deal with custody battles, and there's all kinds of things that are happening, whether it's our children being our older children being locked up for numerous petty crimes or even injustices that we face. These are things that we as a people deal with that these other nations don't deal with, right? And this is just another example of the curses, right? We talked about, I got through like half of the curses, and next week there'll be another lesson on the second half of the curses in Deuteronomy 28. But really quickly, I don't want this to just end with despair, right? There's hope for us. There's literally a guide for what it is to do to get out of these curses, right? So let's grab that real quick. Grab Deuteronomy 30 and 1, and we'll read through 3.
God. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 1. And it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse which I have set before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations whither the Lord thy God hath driven thee.
So that's what we're doing right now. We're calling these things to mind, right? We're remembering and turning back to the Bible and getting the understanding of who we are and what it is that we need to do. Go ahead.
And shalt return unto the Lord thy God, and shalt obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day.
That's key, right? We are to turn back to the Most High God and obey his commandments. Go ahead.
thou and thy children with all thine heart and with all thy soul, that then the Lord thy God will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all nations whither the Lord thy God hath scattered thee.
So it's important, that we come into this truth, we read our Bibles, we get the understanding, and we turn back to the Most High God, our God, and we obey his laws, statutes, and commandments. Not only us, but we teach it to our children, so that they're able to teach it to their children. And that way, the Most High God promised he's going to turn our captivity. He's going to have compassion on us, and he's going to gather us from all the nations that he scattered us in, and save us from this captivity. So let's get back to the doing and the teaching of this word, Yasharahla. And if you don't have anything else, we're gonna
Shalom.
Shalom.